Hey piano people! In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you exactly how to make your piano scales sound better in 3 steps. There are 2 main ways that scales come up for piano players on a regular basis. The first way is in the practice of scales by themselves. Maybe you're trying to learn all of the major and minor key signatures, or you're trying to improve your technique, and you're just spending time every single day working on playing through scales. The second way is when scales or scale passages come up in actual pieces of music. The 3 steps that I'm going to take you through in this video are actually going to apply to both. So whether you're practicing scales just to improve your scales, or whether you're encountering difficult scale passages in your pieces, these 3 steps are going to make your scales sound smoother, faster, and you're going to have a lot more freedom and fluidity when you play your piano scales if you take these 3 steps. As we go through these 3 steps, I'm going to be giving you 2 examples. The first example is just the C major scale, and that way you can take each step and apply it to your practice of scales. The second example is the Kuhlau Sonatina, Opus 55, number 3. There's a lot of just straight up scales that occur in this piece, and so it's a great example to show you these 3 steps in this video. Let's dive in. So the first step that you're going to take in order to make your piano scales sound good is you're going to figure out the correct fingering and be consistent. Now this can get a little bit dicey because there are a lot of people that think that you can just make up a fingering for a scale. And if you are guessing about the fingering, or if you are non-committal about your fingering, meaning every time you practice the scale or every time you encounter a scale passage in a piece, you're just kind of like making up the fingering as you go, you're never going to be able to play the scale with freedom or fluidity or any sort of musicality. Our brains need repetition of the same thing over and over and over again in order to commit something to memory. And so in order for you to develop the muscle memory that is required for you to be able to play either a scale or a scale passage in a piece of music, you're going to have to do the fingering the same every single time. So in order to do that, you first have to pick a fingering that actually works for the scale or for the scale passage. And then you have to be consistent with that fingering. So when it comes to practicing scales, I actually recommend that you get a scale book. They are not expensive, and they have all of the proper scale fingerings written out for you on the page. The danger of Googling or just looking on the internet for the scale fingerings is you have to make sure that your source is reputable. Don't just follow the fingering suggestions from any random resource on the internet. You want to make sure that it's someone that knows what they're talking about. I have several shorts where I talk about the proper fingering for scales, and you can check some of those out. But a scale book is a great resource because it's comprehensive and you know that all of the fingerings are going to be correct. This is my favorite one, and you can grab it using the link in the description below. Now, when it comes to a piece of music and you're trying to decide on fingering, I would suggest that you consult a couple of different scores. And the reason for this is because, generally speaking, you're going to have different editions by different publishers, which means that they consulted different professional pianists to edit the score. And so sometimes you'll take the same piece and you'll find it published by, 4 or 5 different companies, and they all will either have the same fingering written out, or they will have slightly different variations for you to try. When it comes to picking a fingering for a scale or a scale passage that's in a piece of music, you have to take into consideration what comes right before the scale and what comes right after the scale. Hey piano people, I'm interrupting my own video because I wanted to make sure that you heard the super exciting announcement that I recently released the Secrets to Sight Reading digital course. This is a course that you can go at your own pace to master the art of sight reading. This course contains 6 modules with custom printable resources, videos, PDFs, and so much more that will teach you exactly how to practice sight reading so that you can master sight reading. You'll play with less wrong notes, more confidence, and more flow. So check it out using the link in the description below. So let's dive in and look at these examples. The nice thing about the fingering for the C major scale is that it's always the same. You're always going to use the same fingers, and it's a variation on the same pattern for the right hand and the left hand. So looking at the music on the screen, you can see that the right hand is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it's going to be the exact same thing in reverse coming down. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1. Now the left hand is actually those exact same fingers, just in reverse, because the left hand starts by going up and starts on the pinky. So the left hand is 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1. And and then the same in reverse going down. And when we look at the Sonatina by Kuhlau, we're going to be looking at measures 9 through 12, where we just have C major scale patterns straight up. So in measure 9, we have a C major scale. Now the nice thing is that the fingering that we're going to use for that C major scale pattern is exactly the same as the C major scale. It's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1. And then the scale does end on a B. And so instead of crossing our 4th finger over, this score suggests that we cross our 2nd finger over to land on that B, because what comes after this scale passage is that we're actually going to have to go back up. Okay, so we're going to alter the fingering at the end right there, just so that we can land on that B and then come back up as the music calls for. Now, when we get to measure 11, we have a C major scale, but it's starting on a D. And so the fingering suggested here is 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1. The exact same fingering. It's just starting on a different note, but it's actually the exact same fingering that we just used on the scale passage before. And very similarly, we're going to cross over at the end to the 2nd finger because we have to come back up. So you can see why it's important that we're going to follow the scale fingering that makes sense, but take into consideration what comes before the scale and what comes after the scale. Again, the most important thing here is that you are picking fingering that is correct, meaning it works with what comes before and after in the musical example, and also it makes sense technique-wise for what you're trying to accomplish. If the scale needs to be fast, your fingering needs to allow for that, etc. And the other part that's very important is that you're being consistent. So once you decide on that fingering, especially in your piece of music, you're going to write it down and you're not going to stray from that fingering anymore. It will always remain the same. The second step to making your scale sound good is to use proper technique. This is where a lot of people go wrong because they are trying to get that freedom and speed with the way that they're playing scales, but they're going about it all wrong. And so the scales sound really clunky, or you have tension creeping in, or you're just not really able to play with the speed that you want to when it comes to scales. So when it comes to the proper technique, for scales and also for scale passages in music, you want to make sure that you are keeping your fingers glued to the keys and that your fingers are nice and rounded. Oftentimes people are playing with flat fingers and they're playing up here in the black keys. And as long as you're playing with flat fingers and you're playing up here in the black keys, you're not going to be able to play with any sort of speed or grace. So your scales likely sound really clunky. It's likely that your hands are doing something really awkward. So what we want to do is pull out to the edge of the keys. It's going to feel a little more scary here in the beginning, but it'll actually give you a lot more control in the long run. And you're going to keep your fingers rounded, okay? None of this flat finger stuff. Keep your fingers rounded on the edge of the keys. And we want to make sure that you're not thinking about placing an individual finger on an individual note, because as long as you're thinking about note by note by note, you're never going to be able to play the scales with any sort of speed. You want to have that consistent fingering so it gets into your muscle memory, and then you're going to use your arm as a guide. So I actually want you to think about your elbow leading you as you go up and down the keys. If I think about my fingers moving me, what happens is it sounds like this. It's slow, it's clunky, and my brain's not really conceptualizing the whole motion of playing the scale. It's just thinking note by note by note by note, and so it's always going to be really slow. But once my fingering is into my muscle memory, I can use these elbows and this flexibility here to guide me up the keys, and it sounds like this. And you can see that it was really my elbows and my torso that were guiding me up and down the keys. Now, the proper technique for this scale passage in the Kuhlau Sonatina is very similar to the technique that came up when I was just practicing the scales. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I drop into the key, and that way I have the weight of my arm helping me play that first note, sforzando, which is what the music calls for. And then, similarly to the scales, I'm going to use my arm to guide me down the keys. So drop. At the end of the scale, notice that I was really flexible and loose with the wrist. So it's almost like I played this scale passage with one sweeping motion. And when you have scale passages that come up in your music, you want to think about that. You want to think about, like, what is the gesture or the motion that I would use? And this will depend on how long the scale passage is and also what the direction is. In this example, I'm just going down the keyboard. So I'm considering it one fluid motion where I drop into the keys and then I guide with the elbow and I lift at the end. And that's going to be the general technique that you'll use for scales, but it really depends on what time period your piece is from, how long the scale passage is from, and how it starts and where it ends. If you're learning something from this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up, share this video with other piano players so that they can benefit from it as well, and subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss out on any of the content that comes out on a daily basis. You might also be a really good fit for my free online community where you can post videos, ask questions, and get access to content that I don't share here on the YouTube channel. You can join using the link in the description below. The third step to making your scales sound good is to use a revolutionary practice method. Now, this is especially true whether you're practicing scales for the sake of practicing scales or whether you are encountering scale passages that come up in pieces of music. You want to make sure that you're practicing them in a way that makes sense and helps you develop that speed and fluidity. Now, I don't recommend using a revolutionary practice method if you don't have consistent and proper fingering and if you don't have the proper technique. Because if you try to use a revolutionary practice method, but you don't have those first two steps in place, you're going to end up just leading yourself to more frustration and more stumbling because you don't have those two foundational steps in place. So once you're ready for the revolutionary practice method, I would recommend practicing your scales in rhythms and also using flash practice. Both of these practice methods are going to be highly useful for not only getting actual piano scales into your muscle memory and into your body so that you can really feel them and feel free when you play them, but they're really good at helping you master those really fast technical scale passages or entire scales that come up in pieces of music as well. I have an entire tutorial where I break down exactly how to practice in rhythms and how to practice using flash practice. And so I'm going to suggest that you go watch that tutorial right now so that you can take those revolutionary practice methods and apply them to your scales. And you can do that right here on the end screen. Happy practicing.